Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Now I'm going to start off by showing you something, and this may be ancient history to some of you, but it's the way that I grew up. Years ago, before we had television, and I have to say I did not have a television, our family did not have a television until I was in the 8th grade. And that was the first television in our block, and, you know, our row of houses. And so because we were the first ones to have one, it was a big set. It was black and white. It was kind of grainy, but it was like the first sets that were out. And because it was the first one, we found ourselves very popular for a while until others kept getting their own televisions. But television wasn't very popular. Television wasn't very advanced. And so most people listened to music on the radio. The popular songs, we used to call them the popular songs. It was good music. It wasn't bad music, but it was music that you could hum to and you could sing to. And what the producers of music used to do, say you have a song that's very, very popular, any name song, they would write out sheet music for that song. So anyone who wanted to play it themselves could go to their music store, and there's lots of music stores open at that time, and you could buy sheet music. And what sheet music was, and I'm not sure they still may do it today, but I haven't seen it when I've been into music stores recently. But what happened is that you get a sheet of music with the title of the song that you want. Every song had its own sheet music. And so if you played the piano or played some other instrument, then you could play the song. So here's a song. Now this one, I'm trying to look at the date here because it's pretty old. My mother had it when she was growing up. It was produced in Boston, and the name of the song is Velvet Shoes, and there's a Vietnamese waltz, or it is a Vietnamese waltz, and it says for medium high voice. So what you have is 2 or 3 pages. It's like a little booklet. I'm going to just open it up here so you can see what it was like. It might just be 2 pages long, the front and back cover, if the song was short. But take a look at this. This is the whole song. So supposing my mother liked that song, Velvet Shoes, and she wanted to have a copy of it for herself. She listened to it on the radio, and she'd like to have it so she could play it on the piano. And she was a pretty good piano player. So she went to the music store and bought Velvet Shoes. And it gives the composer, and it also gives the arranger. And then this would be like a solo part. And this would be the key signature, which keeps changing. 4/4, 3/4, 4/4, 3/4. That is the introduction. It keeps changing in the introduction. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. You can write music any way you want to. This would be the piano part, which she would play. And then if she had a friend over that wanted to sing it or play it on another instrument, the top part would be the part that they would sing. And so she'd be playing this, and you notice that the bracket of this is the treble clef, the bass clef. That bracket shows that those two are played together, and that line indicates that this is a melody part attached to it. Anyone could sing it. Now, people had a lot of sheet music because if they heard a song on the radio, I mean, they didn't have a lot of ways in order to record it. They were old tape recorders, but they sounded like old tape recorders, but there wasn't that much to record it. So they would record, or they would write out chords and a piano part so anyone could have the song and be able to play the piano. Treble clef, bass clef, and you notice there are 3 sharps. It's in the key of A. And then you just go through it. Now, in this case, it's a little longer than some, so you'd flip the page, just like a book, and there you have the rest of the song, and this is where it ends right here. And there's an introduction to another song on the back, which is called If Music Be the Food of Love. And that's not the whole song. As you can see, it hasn't finished when it gets down here. But that's part of it, hoping, of course, that you would like it enough so that you would buy your own sheet music for it. But that was it. It was like a book. So people, when they were listening to the radio, when they were listening to popular songs, the same songs repeated over and over, probably tame by today's standards, but nonetheless they had a melody, they had a harmony, they had an orchestral setting, and you could just buy the sheet music. Then you'd have your piano part. It wouldn't be like a full score. It wouldn't be like an orchestral score, but you have your own music for the song that you like, and you could play it, and then someone could sing or play along with you. And people used to make collections of these things. Now, when I've gone into a music store recently, I haven't seen any sheet music. I have seen instruction books. You know, here's a book on how you play the flute or how you play the saxophone and so forth and so on, with fingering charts and exercises. You would use that along with a teacher who would show you how to play, and it would get a little bit more difficult. You would have your beginning, your intermediate, your advanced, you know, you'd have those books that get a little harder as you go along, and if you do well with it, you could play quite well in the end of it, but you'd have to have a teacher show you how to do it. There's nothing worse, in a way, than having a student try to teach themselves if they don't know what they're doing. The reason they got all mixed up, they play it wrong, their hand positions aren't right, and you don't do yourself any favors. It's harder to unlearn a bad habit than it is to learn the right habit to begin with. So you always, if you're going to teach yourself, and I'm not discouraging it necessarily, but just remember, you could get yourself above your head, and you may not be able to figure things out, and you may be learning that you're doing something wrong, and what you're practicing is your mistakes. Instead of practicing good music, you're practicing your mistakes. So if you're going to teach yourself, you really need to have a coach. You really need to have a teacher, even if you didn't take lessons every week, which is really the optimum, is to take lessons every week. But if you couldn't do that, you could at least play for someone who knew how to play, and they could correct you if you were developing any bad habits. But at any rate, this is an example of sheet music, and people used to make collections, any song they liked. They would go down to the music store, they would buy the sheet music, then they would have a copy of the music, a piano part, not the full score, that they could play. So they would have the music and they would be able to play it. And it was very popular. So I don't see that anymore. I see plenty of instruction books, but I don't see sheet music. So I can't, I mean, I'm in my 80s, and things have changed a lot since I grew up. So I don't know whether they're still doing it or not. But I do visit music stores, and it is a concern to me, and this is just kind of an aside, it is a concern to me that many really good music stores are closing. I don't know if it's because people are buying instruments online, or people aren't buying instruments, they're just listening to music, but they're not performing it very much, or whatever it is. But the problem with buying anything online is that you don't get a chance to see it, touch it, hold it, try it. You know, you just put your order in and it comes. And maybe it's a good instrument, but maybe it's not a good instrument. Or maybe it's an instrument that has some failings in it, and there's no way to correct it. The thing about music stores, and I like music stores, and I spend as much time in them as I can, is the fact usually there's somebody on staff that if you have a problem with an instrument, they have a place where you can send it, or somebody on staff that can fix it, or they can check it out for you, at least, so you know what you're dealing with, and then send it off, or whatever their recommendations are. They also have people on staff that know how to play instruments, and sometimes will give lessons to people who want to learn how to play a certain instrument, and they're on staff with the music store. They also can give you good buys on instruments, and even used instruments can be very good. A lot of my instruments are used instruments, and if they're kept up well and they're in good shape, they can last for years, and they're very good. Children, of course, like new instruments because they're shiny and they're bright, but you need to have, if you don't know what an instrument is like or what they're supposed to play like, you need to have somebody show you, somebody who knows the instrument, to check it out before you buy it. And oftentimes, as I was teaching students, a parent would come to me and say, well, I want to buy Johnny a new saxophone, or I want to buy him a new flute. As long as it was woodwinds, I'd be teaching it. So at any rate, and then they would have me go in a music store, and I would explain to the owner of the store that I'm teaching a student whose parents are going to buy an instrument from their store. I want to go through all of their flutes to see which one would be the best within a certain within a certain price range, which would be the best for their student and the student that I'm going to be teaching. And no one has ever refused to let me do that. I would bring sanitation in, and I would check every flute, and within a certain price range that I thought would be reasonable for the parents to pay. And then I would check each one, and I would come up with one. This is the one, this is the best one. It plays the most easily, and it's got the best intonation, and it's got the best pitch, and all of these things I would check. And then the parent would buy it. So I developed a good relationship with a lot of the music stores. Now many of them are closed. And the thing that bothers me so much about that is, where do you take your instrument in for repair? You know, instruments don't last forever. They need repair. Where do you go? Now, sometimes a school will have a place where they can send them for you, because the schools usually have a music department. But I understand that some schools are cutting off all of their music, all of their sports, all of their art, and I think that's just a shame, because students live for that, and it's important to them. And if they cut all of that off, what reason do they have to learn? What reason do they have to learn how to play a guitar if they're not going to even be able to play it in a school band? You know, so it really is critical that these programs continue, because it's good for the students. But also, with the music stores closed, where do you take your instruments for repair? Where do you buy a new instrument? Do you have to go online to do that? And if you go online, you can't see it and see if it's good for you, to see if it works well for you. Especially a used instrument, how good is it? You don't know. So you may pay whatever it is that you pay, and you get whatever they send you, and then you may be stuck with something that has a problem. So at any rate, I just am concerned about that, so I thought I would bring it up. So what I did a few years ago, because I have an extensive instrument collection, I have well over 300 instruments, and where I'm using basically recorders and the simple instruments now, because they can act as a springboard for a lot of other instruments, I decided to collect a group of instruments that I can always use as solo instruments that are new, that are in fine shape, that I can play them, they're in pitch and all of that, and keep them in as a reserve. So if anything happens to any of my instruments, I have backups. And it's a good idea, if you have somebody that's playing an instrument and they're going to be serious about it, and they're going to keep playing it, that if you can get a second instrument as a backup so you can use it if another instrument is out for repair, it's really a good idea to do so. It doesn't have to be the most expensive instrument, and you may not be able to do it at all. And I understand instruments are expensive, but sometimes it's possible to get an instrument at not too high a price, and you have that extra instrument as a spare instrument, and it's important that you have it if you can have it, because you have a backup. But I have a series of instruments that are backups that I have on hand, and sometimes I bring them in and sometimes I don't, but they're good instruments and they play well. And student instruments for beginners and for people who are playing but aren't going to be going into it as a profession, student instruments I think are just as good as the professional ones. Not near as expensive, but they play very well. So that's kind of an introduction. And then you look around a music store and what do you see? All of the instruments that they have for sale. I walked into a music store once with my twin sister. My mother had passed away. She always wanted me to get a lightweight saxophone, if there is such a thing, and there is. And the thing is, when I was getting older and the instruments were heavy and all of this, and I was developing some health problems, I really needed to have a lightweight saxophone, because saxophone is my main instrument. So after she died, my sister and I were walking through a music store, and I looked up. They had instruments hanging from the ceiling, and one of them was a soprano saxophone, a little C melody soprano saxophone. It's about this tall. I mean, it's real small, but it plays just like any other saxophone. And I looked up. And I said, Priscilla, this is my twin sister's name, look at that saxophone up there, small, lightweight. And she looked at me and she said, buy it. And I said, okay. So I walked up to the store and I says, I want to buy that saxophone if it's playing well. Oh, it was playing well, because they had somebody on staff that would do repairs on all woodwinds, and it was playing perfectly. So they unhooked it and they got it down. I have a case for it that I never knew used because the case is in pitiful shape, but it went with the instrument, so I got it. And I have it, and it's wonderful. It's a small saxophone, about this big. It's a soprano. It's in the key of C. I don't have to transpose. And so it's in my collection. But I looked up, and there it is, hanging from the ceiling. So, and you see a lot of other things that you can use for composing, things that you can use to start out with, learning how to play from a beginner standpoint. How do you do that? And so it's very interesting what you can see in a music store. But one of the things that we did grow up with was music stores, and there were usually 3 or 4 in the same town, and lots of sheet music that you could choose from. So if you had a favorite song, you could usually find an arrangement of it that you could actually play on your instrument, or pianos could play and a person could sing to. And I hate to see all of that lost. So in a sense, what I'm doing is I'm kind of bringing you up on past history and what it was like to grow up in a day when we didn't have so much television. We had a little, and it got better and better as time went on, but we didn't have computers. I never saw a computer until I was in college. That's how old I am. It just didn't exist. So I wanted to bring this and show you. I have others. I may bring them in from time to time, but this is an example of sheet music, and the song name was Velvet Shoes, and it's a Vienna waltz. I'm not attempting to play it because it's out of key from what the instruments that I have that I bring with me are. It's in the key of A, which is 3 sharps, which is very, very difficult for a recorder to play. But here you have it, you know, a piano could do it, a guitar could do it. So sheet music, that's what it is. So turning now to music, what I'm doing now, and I'm going to put this up. I don't know, and I don't have my music stand here for some reason, and but maybe I can just look at it on the table. What I'm doing is different times that you use, like triplets, you know, dotted eighths and sixteenths. Thank you. Now I have my music stand. That's good. Different types of timing, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, triplets, all of that, and putting them all together in a song. So I probably won't be able to finish this on this segment, so I may I may do it next segment as well. But here, whoops, I want to switch this. And this is going to be a little larger and easier for you to read. Now, these are triplets and dotted eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice your timing. And I've got 4, 4 time. It's in the key of G, which means it has 1 sharp, and the 1 sharp is the F sharp. This sharp is on the F line, so you know it's for the F. And the other thing is, it doesn't matter if it's an octave. If I have an F down here, which I do, which is a lower octave, it's still going to be chopped because it's sharped in the time signature. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and this, of course, is 4 beats. Now we're getting so we don't have too much time left, but I want to play it, and I'll do a little bit of dissecting for you just so that you'll see what it is. So if you just want to watch it and listen to it and see if you can follow along, and I won't be playing it too fast. I don't know if you realize that, I don't know if it shows up, but there's a little dot on that last note. That's a stinger. It's called a stinger. It's really a staccato note, but it's called a stinger. And what you have is you have quarters, triplets, and dotted eighths and sixteenths and whole notes. And that's all the way through the song. The whole notes I have put in as a whole note, and that's going to be a full 4 beats to each one of them. I could have put a dotted half note, and it would be still, with an extra quarter, it would still be 4. But 4 is this. I could have done it with 2 half notes and put a tie on them. Or I could have done it with 4 quarter notes and put a tie on them. But at any rate, they're worth 4 beats because the time signature says they're worth 4 beats. And or a dotted half would be 3 beats, and then add another quarter and put a tie on it. It would be the same thing. So I'm going to, we don't have too much time left. I'm going to start off with this and just go over this once again, and we'll play it faster. So what I'm trying to do now is just take the different time signatures and different rhythms and put them together as a song. And it can be done that way. So if you feel like you want to start writing some music and be creative, you can just put these things together yourself. What you have to be careful of is that you've got the key right. And most of the time I do it in the key of G with the F sharp. I have a reason for doing that. The reason for doing that is that usually when you play something in the key of G, the D is going to be your lowest note. And there are a lot of people, either because they have small hands, or they're beginners, or they have arthritis or other problems with their hands, it's very difficult sometimes to play the lowest note. A lot of times it's the most difficult note to play on an instrument is the lowest. It usually doesn't take much air, but it is hard to reach. Now even this is not a big finger stretch by any means, but it is a finger stretch if you have arthritis or if you're trying to learn an instrument and it seems hard to get. In the key of G, usually the lowest note is going to be the D, and that's not hard to reach. That's this one right here, B, A, G, F, E, D, or in the case of a Baroque instrument, which this is, B, A, G, F. You put the F down, skip the E hole, and put the next one down. That would be like for a D, but it will lower the pitch of that F a little bit and make it a little bit more accurate. And you don't have to, if you want to play a D, just put this middle finger down, and you don't have to stretch that finger out, which can be problematic for some people. So I'm going to close it here. We'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.